Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you something that might sound simple, but it holds the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. Have you ever heard her say, "I'm fine," and somehow you knew she wasn't? Maybe it was after an argument that didn't feel quite resolved, or when you came home late again and she simply smiled too politely. Maybe you felt it in the silence between you, in the way she reached for her phone instead of your hand, or in the way her lips said, "I'm fine." But her eyes looked like they were asking a question she didn't feel safe to say out loud. That phrase, "I'm fine," is a door she closes gently but firmly, and most men walk away from it thinking the conversation is over. But in truth it's just beginning. When a woman says, "I'm fine," she's not always asking you to fix her feelings. Often she's asking if you're even willing to see them. In today's video, we're going to enter the emotional landscape behind those two words. We're going to talk about what she's really trying to tell you, how to listen beyond the surface, and how to build a bridge back to emotional safety even when she's withdrawn. Because in relationships, the most important things are rarely spoken directly, so let's talk, really talk. Let's slow down for a moment and really be here. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, there's something deeply uncomfortable about being in the presence of someone you care about and feeling them pull away. Not with words, but with distance, with silence, with the weight of something they're not saying, and yet they say it anyway. "I'm fine." You've heard her say it. Maybe last night, maybe last year, maybe so often now that it echoes in your relationship like a familiar ghost. And maybe, like so many men I speak to, you're not quite sure what to do when she says it. You want to respect her space. You want to avoid making it worse. You hope it'll pass, or you tell yourself if she really wanted to talk, she'd say so. But she did. Just not in the way you're used to hearing. When a woman says, "I'm fine," what she often means is, "I don't feel safe telling you how I really feel," and not necessarily because you've been cruel. Often it's the opposite. You've been practical, you've been calm, you've been logical, but maybe she didn't need logic. She needed witnessing. She needed to know that her emotions didn't scare you, that her disappointment wouldn't drive you away, that her need for closeness wouldn't be seen as weakness or drama or pressure. And this is where so many relationships quietly unravel. Not in explosive arguments, but in these small emotional misfires where what's said and what's felt don't align. Where the words become hollow because the emotion behind them feels invisible. Let me paint you a picture. She stands in the kitchen, her back to you, the dinner's cold, the kids are asleep, you ask, "What's wrong?" She doesn't turn. She says nothing, "I'm fine," and you pause because you've heard that tone before. It's sharp but also tired. You know better than to poke the bear, so you retreat. You give her space, but here's the paradox. The space you give her might feel like abandonment to her. You thought you were being respectful, but to her you just confirmed her fear. Even when I'm hurting, I have to deal with it alone. You see, when she says, "I'm fine," what she might be saying is, "I don't want to be the only one holding this relationship together," or "I don't want to beg for your attention," or "I'm afraid that if I show you how much I care, you'll pull away even further." It's not always about the specific problem. Often it's about a pattern, a feeling that's been building for days, weeks, months. A longing she doesn't quite know how to articulate, or maybe one she's already tried to, but felt dismissed when she did. And let's be honest, men and women are often raised in different emotional languages. Many men were taught to solve, to fix, to stay calm. And those are not bad qualities, but intimacy, true emotional intimacy, often asks for a different kind of presence. Not to solve, but to sit with, not to fix, but to feel. So when she says, "I'm fine," the first thing you must ask yourself isn't, "What did I do wrong?" but rather, what is she carrying alone right now? This is where you become a partner, not a bystander. Maybe she feels unappreciated. Maybe she's been trying to juggle a dozen invisible tasks, the mental load of the home, the emotional well-being of the family, and no one's noticed. Maybe she feels like her voice has become background noise in a room where everything else is louder. And maybe, just maybe, she's testing something when she says I'm fine. Not to manipulate you, but to see if you're really paying attention. Because if she always has to spell it out, if she always has to ask for what she needs 3 times before it's heard, if her frustration has to become a full-blown argument before it's taken, seriously, then what does that teach her? It teaches her that her soft signals don't matter, that she has to yell just to be seen. And so she stops yelling, she stops asking, she goes quiet, and in that quiet she says I'm fine. Now here's the hard part, and this is where your courage comes in. Most men want peace, but sometimes peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth. And truth doesn't always sound sweet. Sometimes it sounds like tears, sometimes it sounds like anger. But beneath all of that, it sounds like love trying not to give up. So when she says I'm fine, and you feel that knot in your stomach, don't walk away. Lean in, not with pressure, not with force, but with openness. You might say, I hear you saying you're fine, but I feel something else between us. If there's something you don't want to talk about right now, I respect that, but I want you to know I'm here. I care, and I'm not going anywhere. You see the difference. You're not pushing her to open up on your timeline. You're letting her know that her emotional world matters, that she doesn't have to hide behind politeness or exhaustion or fear, that this relationship is a safe place to be messy, complicated, even angry, because that's the only way we grow. That's the only way intimacy deepens, and it's not about being perfect. It's about being present, so the next time you hear those words, I'm fine, don't hear them as an answer. Hear them as a question. Will you see me even when I'm hiding? And if you can answer yes, something beautiful starts to shift. There's a moment in every relationship where silence becomes a louder language than words, where someone says I'm fine. And what they really mean is, I want you to see me without me having to explain every corner of my heart. And in that moment, the most dangerous thing you can do is take her literally. Because that I'm fine might be her armor, not to push you away, but to protect herself from the disappointment of feeling unseen again. It might be the last defense of someone who has learned over time that vulnerability often leads to distance. That when she finally opens up, you look at her like she's too much, too emotional, too intense, too confusing. So instead, she shrinks, she smiles, she says she's fine, but inside she's keeping score, not to punish you. But because unspoken emotions don't disappear, they accumulate. They live in the body, in the tension of her shoulders, in the sigh she lets out when she thinks you're not listening, in the way she begins to retreat from the emotional closeness she used to crave. And here's what's even more important to understand: her I'm fine is not only about you. Sometimes it's about herself. It's about the pressure she feels to be strong, to not burden anyone, to carry it all without falling apart. Because somewhere along the way she learned that if she breaks, the whole system breaks with her, the kids, the house, the routines, the emotional balance of the family. So she minimizes her pain, she dilutes her needs, she hides her loneliness behind that small, rehearsed phrase. I'm fine, and in that moment you have a choice. You can accept her words and move on, or you can become curious. Not suspicious, curious. Because real intimacy is built not on assumptions, but on curiosity. That might sound like this: you say you're fine, but something in your voice tells me you're carrying something heavy, and even if you're not ready to talk, I want you to know I care about what. Under the surface, you see you're not interrogating her. You're creating a space where she feels emotionally safe enough to not have to pretend. You're saying, I see you. And for a woman who has spent much of her life holding everything together, that's one of the most healing things you can do. Because sometimes I'm fine is also grief. It's mourning the relationship you both promised to protect, but now feels like it's running on autopilot. It's missing the version of you that used to notice her, want her, ask her questions that didn't just revolve around errands or bills or logistics. She doesn't always want grand gestures. She wants to be felt. She wants to know that when her mood shifts, you notice. That when she's quiet, you don't just say okay, but you ask with tenderness, is there something you're not saying? That when she's overwhelmed, you don't offer solutions right away, but first you offer presence. And for the man who says, but I don't know how to do that, I wasn't raised to speak that way, I want to tell you, she doesn't need you to be poetic. She just needs you to be available, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Even if you fumble through your words, even if you get it wrong sometimes, what matters more is that she sees you're trying. That you care enough to risk being uncomfortable for the sake of connection, because this isn't about emotional perfection. It's about emotional investment. Sometimes the smallest shift can make the biggest difference, like noticing that she's been quiet for days, and instead of saying, "What's wrong now?" you say, "I've felt some distance between us, and it matters to me. I want to understand how you're feeling." Or when she pulls away and says nothing's wrong, you sit next to her instead of walking away. You offer your presence before your opinion. You hold space before you speak. And yes, sometimes she will push back. She might say, "I don't want to talk about it." That's okay. Don't push her, but don't disappear either. You can say okay, but if and when you do, I'm here, and I mean that. That kind of steady, patient love, it builds trust. It says you're not alone in this. Because one of the most heartbreaking things in any relationship is the feeling of being emotionally alone while physically together. You sleep in the same bed, you eat at the same table, but your hearts are on different islands, and the bridge between those islands isn't built through logic or debate. It's built through emotional attunement. That means listening not only to her words, but to her silences. It means realizing that sometimes she says "I'm fine," not because she wants to be left alone, but because she's testing if you'll care enough not to leave her alone in that feeling. It's subtle but powerful. It's the difference between transactional love and transformational love. Transactional love says, "Tell me what you need so I can do it and move on." Transformational love says, "Even if you don't have the words yet, I'm here, I'm listening, I care." And that kind of love, it softens walls, it reopens hearts, it heals the parts of her that thought she had to fight or freeze in order to be heard. So when she says, "I'm fine," what will you hear? Will you hear a closed door? Or will you recognize it for what it truly is, an invitation to come closer, but more gently this time? There's a kind of exhaustion that sets in when a woman feels emotionally invisible in her own relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, quietly. It builds in the moments when she swallows her truth to avoid conflict, when she tells herself it's not worth the trouble, when she whispers "I'm fine," just to keep the peace. But the truth is, peace that costs your emotional presence isn't peace at all. It's self-abandonment. And when she says "I'm fine," sometimes it means she's beginning to check out, not because she doesn't love you, but because she no longer believes that love is being returned in the way her soul understands. She might still make dinner. She might still smile at your friends. She might still say good night before rolling over and facing the wall. But her heart may have already started rehearsing its exit. You see, most women don't leave suddenly. They leave emotionally first. They start detaching, withdrawing, shutting down, often in plain sight. And sometimes the first sign of that detachment is those two words, "I'm fine." They're a whisper of resignation. And yet, here is where many men make a critical mistake. They hear her silence, and instead of leaning in, they match it. They begin to mirror her withdrawal. They get defensive. They assume she's just being moody or irrational or difficult. And without realizing it, two people start walking away from each other, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. But what if you did the opposite? What if, instead of retreating, you responded with presence? What if you said, "Hey, I can sense that something's going on. I want to understand it, not to fix it right now, not to debate, but just to be with you in it." That's what emotional intimacy looks like, and I understand that may not have been modeled for you. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were shut down, where vulnerability was treated as weakness, where silence was the norm and emotional openness was foreign. But just because you didn't grow up with that language doesn't mean you can't learn to speak it now. It starts with curiosity that's not about control but about connection. It sounds like, "How are you feeling these days, really?" Or, "When you said you were fine last night, it felt like there was more underneath. Can we talk about it when you're ready?" You're not forcing her to open up. You're offering her the dignity of being seen, the safety of being felt, because here's something we don't talk about enough. The bravest thing a woman can do isn't falling in love. It's trusting that her emotions will be met with tenderness, not judgment. And the bravest thing a man can do is to stay open when his instinct is to shut down. Let me be clear, this isn't about blame. It's not about making you wrong. It's about showing you the emotional landscape that lives beneath the surface of "I'm fine." Because if you can see that, if you can read the weather in her tone, in her eyes, in her body language, you will not only save your relationship, you will transform it. You will become the kind of partner who doesn't just react, but responds with emotional depth. And this isn't about doing it perfectly. It's about doing it consistently. Even if she's not ready to talk, your softness will be remembered. Even if she pushes you away, your gentleness will be noticed. Even if she doesn't say it out loud, your effort, your presence becomes a kind of emotional medicine. Because when a woman says "I'm fine," what she's often really asking is, "Can I still trust you with my heart? Do you care enough to look beneath my surface? Will you love me even when I don't know how to ask for it clearly?" And your answer, not in words, but in actions, will determine whether her heart stays open or quietly closes. So next time you hear those two words, don't panic, don't argue, don't walk away, pause, feel the moment. Listen to the silence behind her voice, and respond not with defensiveness, but with softness, because sometimes love is not loud. Sometimes it's a quiet question that asks, "Are you here with me?" And the answer that matters most is how you show up in that silence. What she really wants, what she's always wanted, isn't perfection, it's presence. And not just the kind of presence where you sit next to her on the couch scrolling through your phone, or lie beside her at night in a room thick with silence. No, I'm talking about the kind of presence that says, "I'm still choosing you even when I don't understand you completely." Because a woman who says "I'm fine" is often hoping you'll hear what she's too tired to explain. She might be carrying years of little heartbreaks. The way you used to reach for her hand without thinking, the way you looked at her when she entered a room, the way you made her feel when she laughed, and you actually paused to admire it, she remembers those things. And sometimes she mourns them in silence when she says "I'm fine." She might be grieving what feels lost between you, not always out loud, but in the small ways she stops trying. Maybe she used to ask you to sit and talk with her before bed, but now she doesn't ask anymore. Maybe she used to get excited to tell you about her day, but now she keeps it short. Maybe she used to cry when she was hurting, and now she just shuts the door and says she needs space. These changes don't scream, they whisper, and unless you're tuned in to hear them, you'll miss them entirely. You'll assume everything's okay until the day she finally stops reaching out at all. That's the emotional cliff many relationships silently edge toward, where one person stops expressing and the other stops noticing. But it doesn't have to be this way, because if you're watching this, it means you care. You're already halfway there. You want to show up better. You want to bridge that gap, and I want to tell you something. It's not too late. Yes, she may have built some walls. Yes, she may have grown quiet. But love doesn't die from one big moment. It dies from 1,000 missed chances to turn toward each other. So take this moment right now as your invitation to turn back. Not to fix everything overnight, not to promise her the moon, but to say, I see now that there's more behind your silence than I was willing to admit. I want to know your truth, and I want to earn my way back into your heart, not just your routine. And when you do this, when you show up like that, something changes. Not because you magically know all the right words, but because your energy tells a different story now. It tells her, I'm here, I'm staying. I'm listening not just to what you say, but to what you've stopped saying. And listen, she may not open up right away. She may test you. She may need time, but stay consistent. Stay open. Keep inviting her back into emotional safety, not with pressure, but with patience. Ask her what she needs more of. Ask her what she's been missing. Ask her what hurts that she hasn't told you about. And when she begins to tell you, resist the urge to fix it. Just hold it. Let her know her truth can land safely with you, because that's intimacy, not solving, but holding. Not rushing to resolution, but sitting in the discomfort together. And maybe for the first time in a long time, she'll believe you when you say, you matter to me. Because your actions will finally match your words. That's when the healing begins, when I'm fine is no longer the default. When she starts saying, actually, I'm not okay, but thank you for asking. When she starts reaching for your hand again, not because everything is perfect, but because she trusts that you're emotionally present now. And when she feels safe again, she comes back fully, emotionally, sensually, spiritually, because a woman in love is magnetic, but a woman who feels seen is powerful. So let this be your turning point. Let this be the moment you stop hearing I'm fine as a closed door and start hearing it as a whisper for help, a longing, a request for closeness that doesn't yet know how to form the words, because underneath it all, she's not asking for a superhero. She's asking for your heart, your attention, your honesty, your emotional investment. She wants to know if you're willing to love her not just when it's easy, but when it's complicated, messy, and quiet. And the answer to that question is everything. If this conversation resonated with you, leave a comment below. Tell me, what have you heard in her I'm fine that you didn't notice before? What's one way you're going to start showing up differently today? And if you found value in this space, please like the video, subscribe to the Intimacy Lab, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because the truth is, we all deserve to be seen, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to truly see the one we love. Here's to love that listens, here's to love that grows, and here's to you for showing up with heart. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and stay connected.